They lurk in the darkest corners of the human psyche, ancient archetypes that have survived for 2 millennia, waiting for the moment the world unravels. We see their shadows in every pandemic that sweeps the globe, in the smoke of every burning city, in the hollow eyes of the starving, and in the inevitable silence of the grave. They are the ultimate harbingers, the architects of the end, and the mere mention of them invokes a primal, vibrating fear that transcends culture and creed. We know them as the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. But here is the paradox that few realize. Despite their towering presence in our nightmares and our art, their actual appearance in the ancient text is fleeting, a mere few verses in a book of thousands. How did these four spectral riders capture the imagination of the world so completely? To understand the horsemen, we cannot simply list their names. We must go back to the source. We must step into the terrifying, hallucinogenic vision of a man named John, isolated on an island, who claims to have seen the very throne room of the Creator and the scroll that holds the destiny of mankind. The story begins not with a whimper, but with a sensory assault. It is the end of the 1st century, and John is in exile. But his reality is about to be shattered. He tells us in the book of Revelation that the silence of his isolation was broken by a sound that tore through the air like a trumpet blast, a sonic boom that commanded him to turn around. When he did, he didn't see a man in the traditional sense. He saw a figure that defied earthly physics, a son of man, dressed in a robe with a golden sash, but with eyes that blazed like uncontrolled fire. This entity was so overwhelming, radiating such raw, kinetic power, that John's legs gave out, and he collapsed as if dead. But the figure reached out, not to destroy him, but to commission him. This was the prelude, the invitation to witness the end of history. John was told to write, and then the scene shifted. He wasn't just observing anymore, he was transported. He explains that he was taken through a door standing open in heaven, pulled from the dust of the earth into the nerve center of the cosmos. Imagine standing before a throne that doesn't just sit there, but pulses with living light. John describes the occupant of this throne not with human features, but with the brilliance of gemstones, having the appearance of jasper and ruby, projecting a light so intense it would blind a mortal eye. Encircling this epicenter of power was a rainbow, but not the fleeting pastel arcs we see after a storm. This was a solid, shimmering emerald halo, a 360-degree ring of green fire. The atmosphere was chaotic and terrifying. Flashes of lightning didn't strike from the sky, they erupted from the throne itself, accompanied by rumbles of thunder that shook the foundations of this celestial room. This was not a place of quiet contemplation, it was the engine room of judgment. Surrounding this central throne were 24 lesser thrones, occupied by elders in blinding white, crowned with gold, sitting in a circle of eternal reverence. But they were not the strangest things there. In the center, around the throne, were 4 living creatures that defy biological classification: a lion, an ox, an eagle, and a man, but warped into divine chimeras, each possessing 6 wings and covered, inside and out, with eyes. Thousands of unblinking eyes, watching every angle of time and space, seeing the past, the present, and the terrifying future simultaneously. It is here, amidst this cacophony of thunder and the gaze of the multi-eyed beasts, that the drama of the horsemen truly begins. John sees a scroll in the right hand of the figure on the throne. This isn't just a piece of parchment. It is the deed to the earth, the script of the final days. It is writing on both sides, saturated with information, but it is sealed shut with 7 wax seals. The tension in the room spikes. A mighty angel shouts into the void, asking who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll. The question hangs in the air, echoing through the vastness of heaven. And the answer is a crushing silence. No one in heaven, no one on earth, and no one under the earth is found worthy. The weight of this realization breaks John. He tells us he wept and wept, because if the scroll cannot be opened, justice will never be served, evil will never be punished, and the story of humanity will remain unfinished. It is a moment of cosmic despair. But then one of the elders touches his shoulder. He points to the center of the throne. John looks, expecting a lion, a conqueror. Instead, he sees a lamb. But this lamb looks as if it had been slain, bearing the fatal wounds of sacrifice. Yet it stands alive. It possesses 7 horns and 7 eyes, representing perfect power and perfect vision. This lamb steps forward and takes the scroll. The moment it touches the parchment, the heavens erupt in a new song, a roar of worship, because the one being capable of unlocking the apocalypse has finally arrived. The stage is set, the seals are about to be broken, and what lies behind them will change the world forever. The silence of the throne room is shattered, not by a scream, but by the sickening, crisp sound of the first wax seal snapping open. The Lamb, the figure of ultimate sacrifice, has initiated the countdown. John watches, his breath caught in his throat, as one of the 4 living creatures, the one with the face of a lion, roars out a single, thunderous command that shakes the floor of heaven. Come. And from the void of the unknown, the first horror rides forth. It is a white horse, pristine and terrifyingly bright. The color white usually signals purity, a surrender flag, or the righteousness of saints. But there is nothing peaceful about this rider. He sits high in the saddle, gripping a bow in his hand, a weapon of distance, a tool designed to strike from afar without ever looking the victim in the eye. He is given a crown, a symbol of authority. But this is not a crown inherited by birthright. It is the crown of a victor, a conqueror bent on absolute domination. He rides out with a singular, chilling purpose: to conquer. But who is this enigma in white? For centuries, scholars and theologians have wrestled with his identity in the dark hours of the night. Some look at the crown and the color white and see a mirror of Christ himself, the King of Kings returning to claim his own, citing later verses where Jesus rides a white horse in final victory. To them, this is the spreading of the gospel, a conquest of truth. But others see a deception, a counterfeit Savior, the Antichrist arriving disguised in the robes of righteousness to mislead the world before the true horror begins. There is a darker, more visceral interpretation that has taken root in the modern imagination, one that transforms the White Rider into the specter of pestilence. In the suffocating atmosphere of a 1916 novel, the rider is described bending his bow not to loose a steel-tipped shaft, but to fire arrows infused with invisible bacteria, seeding the air with silent death. While the ancient text does not explicitly name him pestilence, the implication is woven into the aftermath. If the other riders bring war and famine, this first conqueror may well represent the invisible invasion, the plague that travels on the wind, the sickness that respects no borders, the microscopic conqueror that brings civilizations to their knees without firing a single shot. He is the initial shock, the destabilizing force that weakens the global body before the hammer blow falls. He represents a period of time where the world is lulled into a false sense of security by a leader or a force that promises victory, only to leave a trail of infection and decay in its wake. As the echoes of the white hooves fade, the Lamb breaks the second seal. The atmosphere in the throne room shifts instantly from the cold calculation of conquest to the hot copper smell of blood. The second beast gives the command, and a second horse charges into John's vision. This one is not white. It is red, fiery red, the color of a dying sun, the color of Mars, the color of arterial spray. The rider upon this beast does not carry a bow. He is given a great sword, a weapon of intimacy and brutality. His power is terrifyingly specific. He is granted the ability to take peace from the earth. Note the wording. He does not just bring war. He actively removes the very concept of peace. It is as if a madness is released into the atmosphere, a psychological toxin that dissolves diplomacy and restraint. He makes men kill each other. This is not strategic warfare. This is slaughter. It is neighbor turning against neighbor, the collapse of civil order, the descent into a primal state where violence is the only language left spoken. The imagery here is blunt and unforgiving. The rider of the red horse is volatile, wild, and utterly devoid of redeeming qualities. In many artistic depictions, he holds his massive sword upward, mimicking the pose of a Roman commander signaling the charge, a nod to the ancient persecution where the sword of Rome was the instrument of terror against the early Christians. This rider signifies the end of negotiation. When he rides, treaties are burned, and the veneer of civilization is stripped away to reveal the savage beneath. If the white rider was the cold calculation of conquest, or the silent creep of disease, the red rider is the hot, screaming chaos of battle. He is the manifestation of humanity's oldest sin, the urge to destroy, unleashed on a global scale. He prepares the earth for the suffering that is to follow, ensuring that when the food runs out, there will be no unity left to solve the crisis, only the sword and the desperate will to survive. The dust from the red horse's rampage has barely settled when the Lamb reaches for the scroll once more. The third seal is broken. The sound is different this time, not a roar of conquest or a battle cry, but something colder, more hollow. John looks, and from the shadows emerges a black horse. The color is absolute, absorbing the light around it, representing the crushing void of famine and the darkness of mourning. The rider sitting atop this beast is terrifying not because he carries a weapon, but because he carries a tool of commerce. In his hand, he holds a pair of scales. In the ancient world, scales were used to weigh grain during times of catastrophic shortage, measuring out food like gold dust. This rider does not need to swing a sword to kill you. He simply waits for your body to consume itself. He represents the slow, agonizing calculation of survival. But the true horror of this scene is auditory. For the first time, a voice speaks, but it does not come from the rider. It emanates from the midst of the four living creatures, a divine announcement of the new world order. The voice declares, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages. Let the weight of that math sink in. In this apocalyptic economy, a person must work from sunrise to sunset, sweating and bleeding, just to earn enough bread to feed themselves for a single day. There is nothing left for their children, nothing left for the next day. It implies a struggle just to sustain one's own heartbeat, let alone a family. The rider of the black horse brings a world where the currency is calories, and the price of life has become too high to pay. And then the voice adds a strange, stinging caveat. Do not damage the oil and the wine. This single sentence adds a layer of cruel irony to the suffering. Wheat and barley are the necessities of life, the fuel of the poor, and they are being rationed into oblivion. But oil and wine? These are the commodities of the wealthy, the substances of luxury and sacrament. Some interpret this as the ultimate class warfare, where the rich continue to thrive and anoint themselves with oil, while the poor starve in the streets, deepening the divide until it snaps. Others see a more biological torture. The rider leaves the wine untouched to mock mankind, allowing them to drink themselves into a state of merriment or stupor, but leaving them with no nutrition. You can have your wine, the rider says, but you will still wither away and die of starvation. It represents a world turned upside down, where luxuries are abundant, but the basic necessities of survival have been wiped from the face of the earth. Just as the horror of starvation sets in, the fourth and final seal is broken. The atmosphere in the throne room changes from desperation to finality. John looks and sees a pale horse. The Greek word used here describes a sickly, yellowish green, the specific color of a corpse in advanced decomposition. This is the color of the end. The rider of this horse is the only one who is given a name. He is simply called Death. He needs no bow, no sword, no scales. He is the event horizon. But he does not ride alone. Following close behind him, like a dark shadow or a vacuum cleaner for souls, is Hades. In this context, Hades is not a god, but the grave itself, the holding place of the dead, sweeping up the debris that death leaves behind. The scale of their authority is paralyzing. We are told they were given power over a fourth of the earth. Imagine the global population today. Now imagine 1 out of every 4 people ceasing to exist. They kill with a terrifying synergy, by sword, by famine, by plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. This final detail, the wild beasts, paints a picture of total societal collapse. It implies that humanity has been decimated to such a degree that we no longer sit at the top of the food chain. The cities fall silent, the infrastructure crumbles, and nature rushes in to reclaim the ruins. The animals, starving and emboldened by our absence, become the predators of the survivors. It is a poetic but brutal end. Despite all of man's technology and arrogance, we are eventually eaten by the world we thought we tamed. The pale rider leaves nothing but silence in his wake, marking the end of the age of man and the beginning of the final judgment. But as the dust settles on the vision of the pale rider, we are left with a gnawing ambiguity that has plagued theologians for 2,000 years. Who or what are these entities really? We assume they are monsters, demons sent to drag humanity into the abyss. But a closer inspection of the ancient texts reveals a far more complex and unsettling possibility. There is a school of thought that suggests these riders are not enemies of the divine, but agents of it. Some scholars point to the apocryphal and mysterious Book of Enoch, a text that details the celestial hierarchy with frightening specificity. They argue that the four horsemen are actually the four great archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, descending to earth not to sin, but to purge. In this light, the devastation they bring is not an act of malice, but a surgical removal of corruption, a cosmic chemotherapy designed to destroy the Watchers and the Nephilim, forcing the world into a painful but necessary reset. It suggests that sometimes the only way to save the garden is to burn it down. However, to the man named John, shivering in a cave on the island of Patmos, this vision was likely far more literal and immediate. We must remember that John was a prisoner of the Roman Empire, a regime that had crushed his people and executed his friends. Many historians argue that the horsemen were never meant to be a prediction of a distant 21st century doomsday, but a coded revolutionary pamphlet against Rome itself. Look at the Red Rider again. He holds a sword and rides a fiery horse, a direct visual echo of Mars, the Roman god of war, who was often depicted in red and worshipped by the legions that occupied Jerusalem. When the scripture says the rider was given power to take peace from the earth, it is a direct attack on the Pax Romana, the Roman peace that was enforced by the blade. The vision suggests that the empire, which prided itself on order, would dissolve into a frenzy of civil war and mutual slaughter. In this interpretation, the Pale Rider, death, is not just the end of a life, but the death of an era, the dissolution of the Roman Empire itself, where the civilization collapses so completely that the wild beasts move into the forums and the Colosseums to reclaim the stone. But if these were merely political cartoons from the first century, why do they still haunt us? Why does the imagery feel so fresh? Perhaps it is because the Four Horsemen are not a one-time event, but a recurring cycle that humanity is doomed to repeat. History is littered with their hoofprints. We can look back to the Crusades and see the White Rider, the conqueror bent on religious conquest, sweeping across continents with a crown and a bow, convinced of his own righteousness while leaving a trail of bodies. We can look to the 14th century and see the other riders in terrifying synchronization. The Great Famine of 1315, where parents ate their own children, perfectly mirrors the Black Rider's scales. This was immediately followed by the 100 Years' War, the Red Rider, and then the inevitable arrival of the Pale Rider in the form of the Black Death, a plague that wiped out nearly half of Europe. This leads us to the most chilling realization of all. The scroll may not be a linear timeline, but a spinning wheel. The text mentions that these riders were given power over a fourth of the earth. This fraction is specific. It implies that their destruction, while massive, is limited. It is a warning shot, a preview. It suggests that we are being drip-fed these punishments throughout history, small tastes of the apocalypse designed to humble us and turn our eyes back to the divine. We see the riders in the Spanish flu, in the world wars, in the modern disparities where the rich hoard the oil and wine of technology and resources, while the poor struggle for the wheat and barley of basic survival. The divide between the wealthy and the starving today mirrors the Black Rider's economy with terrifying precision. The horsemen are not coming. They are already here, riding in the background of every news cycle, waiting for the moment the final seal breaks and the restraint is lifted completely. The narrative leaves us with a final haunting image that feels less like a religious prophecy and more like a scientific inevitability. The text explicitly mentions that after the sword, the famine, and the plague have done their work, the wild beasts of the earth are given power. This is the silent aftermath. It suggests that once humanity has been thinned out or wiped away, the artificial structures we built, our skyscrapers, our borders, our economies, will be overrun. In our absence, animals will have the lay of the land, dominating the face of the earth in a way they haven't since the time of the dinosaurs. It is a brutal, poetic irony. Despite all of man's desperate achievements in civilization and technology, eventually, the lease expires. Nature will reclaim what was lost to our expansion, erasing our footprint as if we were never here. So we are left with the ultimate question. Is this ancient text a literal roadmap of a future doom that is hurtling toward us? Or is it a psychological mirror? Many believers today look at the news, the rumors of wars, the pandemics, the economic fragility, and argue that the horsemen are already saddling up, that the end times are physically upon us. Others see it as a cautionary tale, a divine threat designed to force the wicked to change their ways before it is too late. But whether you view them as literal angels of death or metaphorical warnings, their power remains the same. They remind us that civilization is fragile, that peace is a temporary condition, and that the rider on the pale horse is the only one who is truly patient. For he knows that in the end, he collects everyone. But here is the subversive twist that flips the entire story on its head. We spend our lives terrified of the Four Horsemen, viewing them as external monsters coming to destroy us. But look closely at what they represent. The White Rider is conquest, our obsession with power and control. The Red Rider is war, our inability to forgive and our drive for violence. The Black Rider is famine, our greed and the inequitable distribution of resources where we protect the oil and wine while burning the wheat. The Pale Rider is simply the consequence of the first three. The irony is not that the horsemen are coming to get us. The irony is that the horsemen are us. They are not invading from heaven. They are emerging from the human heart. We are the ones breaking the seals every single day. We fear the apocalypse, yet we are the architects building it brick by brick. This connects to a struggle you likely feel right now. You look at the world and feel a sense of doom-scrolling anxiety, a feeling that things are unraveling. That is the shadow of the horseman. We are living in a time where we have the oil and wine, incredible technology and luxury, yet we feel spiritually starving and constantly at war with one another. The story of the apocalypse forces you to confront the fact that the monster isn't under the bed. The monster is in the mirror. We are the ones holding the scales, deciding who eats and who starves. So I leave you with this choice. It is a question of perspective that changes how you live your life. Do you believe the Four Horsemen are a future event, a destiny we are helpless to stop? Or do you believe they are a present reality, a cycle of human behavior that we have the power to break if we simply choose to stop riding? If you want to survive the next chapter, you need to understand the entities that even the horsemen fear. In the next video, we will dive into the abyss itself to confront the fallen angels that started this war. Subscribe to witness the fall.